Salam sejahtera and a very good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the class of Algalogy. Today is lecture 1, General Introduction to Algae. As you can see here from the figure, we have 6 kingdoms of life, including Plantae, Fungi, Animalia, Protista, Bacteria, and Archaea. Protista contain the hard part group of organisms with many different ancestral lineages. They don't fit into any other kingdom so far, so for this reason, the Protista is considered now to be a group instead of a kingdom. So 5 kingdoms and 1 group. There are 2 major groups has been divided based on the cells type. Each living organism either composed of prokaryotic organism or eukaryotic organism. The members of bacteria and archaea are made of prokaryotic cells. The cells are simpler, smaller in size, do not contain a membrane-bound nucleus, means their chromosome DNA not surrounded by a membrane, which it is free of cytoplasm, called as nucleus. This organism does not have membrane-bound organelle, whereas the other kingdom are all composed eukaryotic cells. Their cells are more complex, larger in size, contain nuclei, and they all have membrane-bound organelle, which including mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic, reticulum, and the others. There are several types of algae in the group of Protista, like green algae, red algae, brown algae, blue-green algae, yellow-green algae, diatom, dinoflagellates, and protozoa. This Protista is polyphyletic, which means they are just have many different ancestral lineages. Okay, genetically, they are not related to each other or not genetically similar to each other and do not have a common ancestor. This makes it difficult to study these organisms and try to classify them. Nonetheless, they all put together in this group as Protista because there are some generalized characteristics that apply to all of them. For instance, the algae are the plant-like Protista, and the protozoa are the animal-like Protista. The algae vary in the color, habitat being unicellular or single cells or multicellular, more than one cell, being microscopic, which means need to view under microscope, or macroscopic, without microscope. Different carbohydrate in their cells wall structure. It is good to know the groups and the phyla names, and it is important to know that all algae have cellulose as cell wall component, except diatom. The cell wall have different carbohydrates, make them differ from each other, which is different from protozoa that do not have any cell wall. The other characteristic of algae are their size and cells arrangement. The algae size can be ranged from being microscopic, which is need to be observed under microscope, and also they are much larger as macroscopic. Macroscopic organisms can reach dimensions greater than 60 meters in the length, which is about 200 feet. The microscopic organisms tend to be unicellular and sometimes they are motile. These organisms can be arranged in different types of arrangement. First, unicellular means single cells. They can be grouped together as colonial, as shown in this figure. These organisms have around 18 single cells. They group together by the gelatinous spur, and they come together for the purpose of food consumption or the reproduction process. As you can see here, the gelatinous fur, there are some of the flagella sticking out, and these flagella make them to be able to sense the surrounding movement. These algae could be beat their flagella and to move forward. Those things that attract them or move away from something that could be toxic or harmful for them. For example, for the process of photosynthesis, these algae together using the flagella to swim toward the light. For the multicellular algae, they are in filamentous arrangement. They could be micro or macro, depends on the cell sizes. The filament are the cells that touch end to end or branch or unbranch, as shows in the figure. They can be complex as well. As you can see here, this is the figure showing seaweed, which is brown algae. The brown algae shows the farm and the leaves that attach to the rock or solid surface. This is not considered as true stem and does not have plant vascular system. So it is in the group of algae category. But like plant, algae are photosynthetic, means their eukaryotic cells have chloroplasts that contain chlorophyll for all algae except the water mole. Besides, they also have different light-sensitive accessory pigment. This gives them different color and they play a major role in photosynthesis. Algae use the energy from the sun, light energy that works on the water molecule. It releases the energy from water molecules and forms the oxygen that release energy then used to take 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and generate 1 molecule of sugar or carbohydrate. This means algae able to produce around 70 to 80% of Earth's atmospheric oxygen as a byproduct of the photosynthesis reaction. Algae also produce enough carbohydrate not only for their own use but enough to supporting the entire marine and freshwater food chain. The algae are the producer of carbohydrate, produce enough organic nutrient that eaten or taken by primary consumers like protozoa, shrimp, copepod, and the others. These are small organisms. They in turn get fed or become food for the small fish that is secondary consumer, which they can be fed up by the tertiary consumer and the quaternary consumer as well. If we remove all the algae from any aquatic environment, all these organisms shown below, algae will be stopped to exist. So it is how amazing these little living organisms are for the ecosystem of Earth. Algae have ability to undergo photosynthesis. They produce oxygen and carbohydrate. Other than chlorophyll, these algae also have different light-sensitive pigment, which help these organisms live in different environments. The reason is the sensory pigment absorb light with different wavelength. Red light absorb through the water first. Then water go deeper, less light will be make it at deeper water. Next come to the yellow, green, purple, violet, and the blue light actually is able to penetrate water deeper. If these algae contain pigment that are able to absorb blue pigment, then these algae able to survive in deeper depth of water. Some light has wide spectrum of visible light that hitting the surface of a water body. So red visible light is absorbed first, so it is penetrate roughly through the first 50 meters of the water. The end of the spectrum are the blue light, which is able to go as far as down as 250 meters. If algae express the right combination of pigment that are capable to absorb light at any given depth of water, then they will be able to survive because they are required to absorb this light so that they can undergo photosynthesis. The green algae can best absorb the red light and can only be found within the top surface of water. And the red algae express blue light absorbing pigment, allowing them to survive at deeper water. The algae diverse in many ways, so this allows them to grow and reproduce in various moist environments. Most of the algae are found in freshwater. The others will be found in marine water. The most common organisms are all in these aquatic habitats. Few others can be found on rocks, soils, and plants, but they have to be moist conditions. Some are found in very extreme temperature conditions like hot spring, in the snow and ice, poor environment, acidity level of water, variety of turbidity level in the water, and huge range of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Some are even able to grow inside the other organism like single cells or protozoa, euglenoid. So the human and animals tissue are generally not habitable by algae, so they are rarely associated with the infections, diseases, but the major threat from the algae to animals and humans is due to the type of food poisoning that are found specifically due to the toxin that they express. For example, the red tide due to a toxin that specific types of organism or algae secrete, like dinoflagella or diatom. The red tides are a common name for algal blooms, which are large concentration of the aquatic microorganisms such as protozoa and unicellular algae. Algae, like the others organisms, normally grow in balance with their ecosystem, limited by the amount of nutrient in the water. But sometimes certain species of algae reproduce so rapidly that they cause the damage. In the ocean, microscopic form of algae can bloom into dense patch near the surface, often referred to as red tide. Some of these harmful algal blooms are dangerous, producing the toxin that kill marine organisms and even foul the air. Some of the algae are motile, whereas others are non-motile. Those are motile tend to be microscopic. They can be both single or colonial. They are often motile by means of gliding or swimming. Single-cell algae tend to be twiddling around, and that is because they have a flagella. Colonial is the single-cell algae grouped together into this gelatinous sphere, and the flagella are sticking out. As you can see in the pictures, these cells have to be together so that they can move into the same direction. Diatom are very geometric. They don't have flagella, but they move very fast. They do have the pore at the apex part, at the end of their cells. They basically can able to have water enter into the body and secrete out the other side. This allows them to glide in the surface. Here is another figure, a tree of life. At the basal node, we have three main branches of life: bacteria, eukarya, and archaea. We circle the fungi, animals, and land plants. So the other cells in the eukaryotic branch of life are considered as protista. Those protista highlighted in the square boxes are algae lineages. They contain something that we consider to be algae. At the left-hand side, there is a group Cyanobacteria from bacteria. It is the only non-eukaryotic class of algae. So, how we get this great diversity of algae? It is started with the Cyanobacteria. The Cyanobacteria is the inventors of photosynthesis, ancestor to all eukaryotic algae. Cyanobacteria evolved photosynthetic pigment for 2.5 billion years ago. This gave these cells the capability to produce energy from sunlight for the first time in the world history. And this allowed them a huge evolutionary advantage because now they no need to seek for the other sources of energy, but they can create the energy by their own from the sunlight. Here we have the pictures of some cyanobacteria cells. They do not have any chloroplast. Here is another image of eukaryotic cells. This eukaryote cannot do the photosynthesis. It has to scavenge for its own food. However, what happened a long time ago was that eukaryotic hosts consumed those cyanobacteria cells. Instead of breaking down them, the eukaryotic host incorporated them into its own cell, keep them in the body and house them. This is the process endosymbiosis. This created a symbiotic relationship where the cyanobacteria live permanently inside a eukaryotic organism. These cyanobacteria eventually evolved into chloroplasts, and this led to all the diversity of eukaryotic algae that we have today. Here is a more detailed diagram of the process endosymbiosis. We can see here the primary endosymbiosis, where the cyanobacteria is being taken up by the non-photosynthetic eukaryotic host. This led to three main lineages: the green, the red, and the lesser known glaucophyte. The green and red lineages then underwent a secondary endosymbiotic event. This is where a second non-photosynthetic eukaryotic host came and took up different red and green algal cells into its own cell and incorporated them into its genome, further creating more diversity and more species of algae. Okay, this diagram will give a little bit more description to the endosymbiosis process. The air box is the primary endosymbiosis event, where we can get such lineages as the green algae, red algae, and glycocytophyte. The bee box is much more complex, where this is the secondary endosymbiosis is occurring. So many different eukaryotic hosts took up many different types of green or red algae and create these new diverse lineages. Some of the lineages that we are most focused on are the cyanobacteria, green algae, red algae, and the diatom and also the kelp. For the primary endosymbiosis, this process involved the uptake of cyanobacteria by a non-photosynthetic eukaryote. The process involved endosymbiont to host DNA transfer and the evolution of a protein import apparatus. These primary plastids are surrounded by two membranes, and the peptidoglycan layer present in the cyanobacteria progenitor of the plastid has been retained in glaucophyte algae but was lost in the red and green algae. For the process of secondary endosymbiosis, it is occur when a primary plastid bearing algae is ingested by a non-photosynthetic eukaryote. The gene of both prokaryotic and eukaryotic ancestry are transferred from the endosymbiont nucleus to the secondary host nucleus. In cryptophyte and chlorarachiophite algae, the endosymbiont nucleus perceived as a nuclear morph, which is residing in the periplastidial compartment that derived from the cytoplasm of the engulfed algae. The nuclear morph have been lost in other secondary plastid bearing algae, and these secondary plastid are categorized by the presence of 3 or 4 membranes. That's all for today. Thank you very much and study smart.